Hey guys, tonight, we slip quietly into the side streets of ancient Rome. The sky is still dim with the weight of a restless city, and somewhere beyond the tiled roofs, a rooster is lying to everyone again. It's not dawn yet, but you're already awake. You're lying on your back in a cramped stone room in the Lupanar, the city's most infamous brothel, with a straw-stuffed mattress poking through thin sheets and a half-burned oil lamp still flickering above you like it forgot to go to sleep. Someone down the hall snores like a dying centurion, and the air smells like rose oil, sweat, and too much wine left to sour in a clay cup. You haven't even moved yet, and already your back is itching from the linen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while we're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who's dozing off with me around the world. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint as light pushes through the wooden slats in the shutters. Morning in the Lupanar is less about peace and more about survival. The room is just big enough for your bed, a chipped amphora filled with tepid water, and a niche where someone's carved a crude drawing of Venus, complete with exaggerated anatomy and a crooked smile. You don't know who drew it. Could have been a client, could have been one of the girls before you. She's gone now, moved on, bought out, disappeared. That's how things go. The walls are layered with graffiti, some praise, some crude, some so poetic. You wonder if they were written by actual poets pretending to slum it. Your name is probably up there somewhere, followed by a price and maybe a compliment about your eyes. Maybe not. Either way, you're part of the wall now, whether you like it or not. You push yourself up, rubbing a sore hip. The mattress is as old as the Republic. Your toes brush the cold floor and you wince. There's always something sharp in the dust. You grope for the small cloth pouch you tied to the bedpost. 3 denarii. Enough for bread, a smear of honey if you're lucky, and maybe a cheap fig if today turns generous. The girl across the hall, her name's Livia, passes by, still half asleep, hair like a storm cloud. "You alive," she mumbles. You grunt back. That's close enough to affection in this place. Livia has a fake pearl earring and a real limp. She says it came from a chariot accident. You're pretty sure it came from a client with more fists than manners. Downstairs, the madam is already awake. You can hear her barking at the new girl who apparently tried to climb out the window last night. Bad idea. The window's barred. And even if it weren't, the street below belongs to drunks, dogs, and worse. Rome doesn't offer gentle landings. You reach for your tunic, a faded scrap of wool dyed a dull rose. It smells like old sweat and incense, but it's better than being naked when the landlord comes through demanding his cut. You step into your sandals, still damp from yesterday's rain. The leather bites your heel. Outside the room, the brothel's hallway is lit by a line of guttering lamps. The floors are streaked with yesterday's footprints, and someone's dropped a coin that nobody bothers to pick up. It's glued there with wine and regret. The exit smells faintly of urine, stronger of desperation. By the entrance, you pass the small altar to Priapus. His little terracotta statue, all grinning face and exaggerated masculinity, guards the door like he's doing anyone a favor. You flick a pinch of ash from the burnt incense pile at his feet. "Don't let me die today," you whisper. It's not much of a prayer, but it'll do. When you step out into the narrow street, the sunlight is finally real, and it bounces off wet cobblestones with blinding confidence. The air is thick with smells, fresh bread from the baker's stall down the alley, sewage from the drainage ditch, and a little bit of everything else. Rome is generous like that. You pause just long enough to stretch your arms, bones cracking like dry reeds. A boy runs past you, barefoot, laughing, too young to understand what this street means. What kind of history stains the walls here? He'll find out soon enough. Maybe he'll join the gangs. Maybe he'll become a senator. Rome doesn't really care which as long as he pays taxes. A donkey carts a load of amphorae past you, led by a man who looks more asleep than the donkey. The amphorae rattle. Somewhere above, a woman pours wash water out the window, and you instinctively step aside. It splashes where you were standing seconds ago. Old reflexes. And now you breathe. Deep, slow. The morning shift hasn't started yet. The city is stirring, but your role in it, your survival, depends on more than just showing up. You need to sell a dream today, or a fantasy, or a moment of forgetting. Whatever it is, it starts now. Historians still argue whether brothels like the Lupanar were state-regulated or run more like protection rackets. The truth is, you don't care. All you know is that every day you wake up in this world, you have to play a part. And the city, loud, indifferent, eternal, is both your stage and your jail. You move toward the Fountain Plaza, where clients often pass through before breakfast. There's something comforting about the rhythm of it all. Wake, walk, watch, work. It keeps you anchored. It keeps you from falling into the silence that waits behind your eyes when you have nothing left to think about. You pass by a graffiti that catches your eye new. Crispina loves well for 2 sesterces. You smirk. Crispina works 3 doors down. You know she charges 4. Someone's trying to drive business. Smart girl, or desperate, or both. A stray dog trots past you, tail wagging, ribs sharp under its matted fur. It sniffs your leg and moves on. You feel a weird kinship with the creature. Neither of you is really seen, not as you are, just as something to be tolerated or used. And just like that, the day begins. Again, you shuffle back inside before the sun climbs too high, because you know what comes next. Your first ritual of the day, and no, it isn't spiritual. It's practical, painful, and absolutely necessary if you don't want to look like you've been dragged by a cart down the Via Appia. You're heading to the back washroom, the one with the bucket of half-clean water and the cracked mirror that makes your face look 10 years older. Which ironically might be accurate if you measured time by what your body has endured instead of what the calendar says. The cold splash hits your skin like betrayal. No matter how many times you brace yourself, it always shocks you. Rome has plenty of heat, but refuses to offer it when water's involved. You scrub your arms, your neck, your thighs. There's a certain choreography to it. Left side first, then right, then press the cloth under your arms, and try not to gag at the smell of old wine, old sweat, and old fear. You reach for the tin bowl of ash and oil that passes for soap. It doesn't really clean, but it masks things. And sometimes masking is enough. A girl you barely know, her name's maybe Nysa, maybe Flora, leans against the wall with a cracked tooth and a bruised lip. She doesn't say much. You both understand there's no time for pity this early. You nod, she nods. That's it. Sisterhood in silence. You pick through a tangle of combs, pulling one with only 3 teeth missing. You work it through your hair, slowly wincing each time it catches a knot. The woman in the mirror winces back. Your hair still smells faintly of wine. You consider cutting it all off. You consider it every morning. Once clean enough to look like you belong to a slightly higher circle of misery, you move on to oils. There's a dish with leftover rose oil, maybe 1 drop left. You mix it with the watery olive dregs in the bottom of another bowl and rub the mix into your skin. The scent is faint but familiar. It reminds you of your mother, or at least of someone who claimed to be her once. Next comes the ritual most hated, the lemon juice and vinegar rinse. Not for the faint of heart or the fair of scalp. You tilt your head and slowly pour the stinging liquid over your hair, gritting your teeth. It burns, but it brightens the strands. Looks more exotic that way, your madam once said, ignoring the welts on your neck. You fight the urge to scream as it drips into a small scratch on your scalp. Beauty in Rome comes with vinegar and regret. As you're patting your skin dry, you hear movement at the front. Footsteps. A door creaks. Someone is leaving the magistrate, probably. He always sneaks out before sunrise, mumbling excuses about legal duties and an urgent Senate meeting. You know he'll be back in 2 days with the same stale toga and the same nervous smile. Historians still argue whether men like him visited for escape or dominance. But you know it's both. Rome may rule the world, but behind closed doors, everyone's pretending to be someone else. The madam bursts in without knocking, of course. Fix your face. There's a ship captain downstairs with silver. She tosses you a clean tunic. Don't mention last night. He thinks you're new. You nod. You've played new before. It's easier than playing hopeful. The tunic is better than yesterday's, dyed deeper, softer on your skin. You slip it on, adjusting the neckline to show just enough, but not too much. This too is an art form, seduction measured in centimeters. You smear a bit of powdered chalk on your cheeks to fake a glow and trace a red line along your bottom lip with a tiny shard of ochre paste. It makes your mouth look fuller. You smile in the mirror just to check. The woman smiling back looks tired but convincing. Good enough. You dab perfume behind your ears, a mix of spikenard and myrrh, watered down and a little sticky. But it masks the vinegar. That's all you ask of it. As you turn to leave, you pass a sleeping girl curled in the corner. Her wrist is wrapped in linen. She's mumbling something, maybe Latin, maybe a prayer, maybe just dreams. You don't stop. You can't. You step around her and keep walking. Out in the common room, the madam is already counting coins and giving sharp looks. There's a tension in the air, like a thunderstorm thinking about forming. The new girl Cassia is crying quietly in a corner. You hear someone mutter, "Her first senator." A few of the older women nod like they've seen this scene 100 times. They probably have. You head out the back door this time, avoiding the front step where the delivery boys gawk. The alley smells like old wine and rotting bread, but the sunlight is gentle now, creeping down the walls, like it's afraid to wake the gods. Your destination, the Fountain Plaza, your unofficial morning office. It's where the men gather early, washing their faces, pretending they just needed water. The mosaic tiles around the fountain are chipped, but colorful blue dolphins, faded tridents. You sit on the ledge, careful not to wrinkle your tunic, and begin your second ritual, watching. A baker's boy walks by, eyes wide. A merchant's apprentice lingers too long. A man in a toga embroidered with gold nods at you, then pretends it wasn't on purpose. You recognize the pattern. They all pretend. You wait. A historian once said that prostitutes in Rome existed between visibility and shame. You find that poetic and useless. You know what you are seen needed and discarded, all at once. Eventually, a man approaches, middle-aged toga slightly askew, too much garlic on his breath. He offers 2 denarii. You raise an eyebrow. He adds a third. You smile. Not because you're happy, but because it's easier than frowning. He whispers something absurd about Greek style. You nod like you understand, even though he clearly doesn't. You stand. He follows. Another transaction begins, not in lust, not in romance, but in practiced performance. Just like the rinse, the chalk, the smile. You pass another girl on the way back. She mouths lucky at you. You mouth not really back. And the day marches forward. The street hums louder now. You step back into the thick of it, Subura, Rome's eternal riddle of grime and grandeur. It's not just a neighborhood. It's a character. It breathes it, spits it, groans with the weight of dreams gone sour. This is where the real Rome lives, not in marble forums or golden villas, but here in alleyways that smell like cabbage ambition and wet stone. You trudge along the edge of the Lupanar district, weaving between fishmongers setting up shop and little boys chasing each other barefoot, tossing pebbles and curses with equal joy. You pass a butcher scraping his block clean with a blade that's older than most of your clients. He doesn't glance up. He knows what you are. He doesn't care. Subura is layered like bad stew. Above you, balconies creak under the weight of laundry lines and angry wives. Below, the streets fill with market clamor, catcalls, religious chants, and the occasional fight that nobody bothers to break up. And smack in the middle of it, red lanterns flicker beside arched doors, markers of your trade. The lanterns aren't always red, but they may as well be. You pass another house with a painted sign, a crude image of a woman winking one hand, raised one foot, suggestively lifted. The artistry is awful. The message is clear. A girl outside waves lazily at you. Her name is Prima, though you're fairly sure she's at least the third with that name on this street. Naming is performance here too. You nod but don't stop. You've got your own corner, your own rhythm. And today, you're tuning the act. Because here's the truth, being a prostitute in Rome isn't just physical labor. It's theater. Every word, every gesture, every side glance is part of the script. You're not just selling access, you're selling illusion. And illusions take rehearsal. Today, maybe you're the Greek import. That one always does well. You soften your accent just enough to sound foreign, but still local. You let your eyes drift with that distant, thoughtful expression, as if you're remembering olives on a hillside, somewhere near Thebes, not the smell of mildew from your sleeping mat. Or perhaps you'll try the reluctant maiden routine, lower your eyes. Let your shoulders slump slightly, speak in hesitant Latin. It draws in men who like to pretend they're the first to corrupt you. Those men are always the worst. You pass a tavern where an old man plays the flute with remarkable dedication and absolutely no talent. The melody bounces off the stone and into your bones. Nearby, two gladiators argue over dice. You slip behind them without a word. The morning clients are mostly lower-tier porters, assistants, temple sweepers. They don't offer much coin, but they're consistent. You know their names. You know which ones cry afterward, which ones mumble thanks, and which ones can't meet your gaze at all. Today, one of them, Cassius, waits by your usual step. He's got soft hands and the world's worst mustache. He thinks it makes him look like a general. It makes him look like a broom sneezed on his lip. Salve, he says, not quite looking at you. You, free. You offer a smile. Not warm, not cold. Just enough to say, I see you. I'll pretend. You'll pay. And we'll both move on. 3, you say flatly. He winces but nods. He follows you back to your room and you put on the voice. Not your real one, the slightly higher one, the one that drips sweetness like honey gone stale. You let him talk too much. You make the right noises. When it's over, he lingers. You ask if he's lost. He leaves. You sit back, counting the coins like they're insults. 3 denarii. Enough for dinner. Not enough for tomorrow. Historians still argue whether Roman prostitutes had freedom of movement or were kept under lock and key. The reality's murkier. You can walk the streets. You can choose a corner. But your choices are shaped by hunger debt and the ever-present shadow of men who believe your body is a toll road they've paid for long ago. You wash again. Just the necessary parts. Then you step outside and return to Subura's living diorama. You catch a snippet of conversation, 2 matrons gossiping loudly about a senator's mistress who dared to wear purple silk. Scandalous. They don't notice you. Or maybe they do, and just decide not to see you. That happens a lot. You take a detour through the side alleys. Not because they're safer, they're definitely not, but because they're quieter. You pass a small shrine to Mercury, the god of commerce and thieves. Appropriate. You flick a small coin onto the altar. Not out of devotion, out of habit. Every god gets a little hope. Down the alley you find one of your favorite sights, a mural of a woman reclining on a couch, a cup of wine in her hand, and a smug smile on her lips. Someone painted her with care, maybe even respect. She looks like she's in control. You stand there a moment imagining that version of you, the one who takes instead of asks, the one who laughs and means it. A breeze picks up stirring dust and the scent of grilled fish. Your stomach growls. You've earned a break. At the corner, you find your favorite food stall. A man named Owlis sells fried chickpea cakes and watery wine. He doesn't overcharge you much. Busy day, he asks. You shrug. Not boring, he snorts. That's Rome. Not boring till it kills you. You eat leaning against a wall, eyes half closed. The chickpea cakes are greasy and perfect. You sip the wine mostly for the vinegar tingle. Owlis waves at you again as you leave. Tell Venus I said thanks. You smile. Not at him. At the absurdity of it all. Because here's the secret the marble statues won't tell you: Rome doesn't care who you are. It only cares how well you perform. And today your act continues. You lean back against the sun-warmed wall of a storehouse and glance down at your hands, calloused, oiled, painted. These are your tools, and they need to work overtime today. Because by mid-morning, the competition thickens. Subura isn't short on women who know how to smile like they mean it, laugh on cue, and speak 5 words in Greek just well enough to fool a drunk noble's son. So you start your next ritual, tuning the sales pitch. The madam calls it polishing your promise. You just call it surviving. You cycle through your available personas like a merchant rotates wares on market day. The untouched provincial girl with the hesitant smile that sells well to the shy scribes. The exotic dancer from Antioch works, like a charm on aging centurions trying to relive their youth. Or maybe today's crowd calls for the laughing siren-type hands on hips, quick with a joke and quicker with a wink. You pick one. Adjust your posture. Arch the back slightly. Drop the shoulders. Not too much or you'll look injured. Slight turn of the head. Chin angled. There. That's the one. You've practiced it so many times it clicks into place like a soldier snapping to formation. A client walks by, a familiar one. Thin, balding merchant hands. He sees you. Smiles. But you hold the gaze just half a second longer than is polite. He flushes and walks away a little too quickly. You know he'll be back in an hour pretending it was his idea. Around the corner you hear another girl sing a love ballad in a deliberately wobbly voice. She's new. You can tell because she's trying too hard. In a week she'll be silent like the rest of you. In a month she might be gone. You reposition yourself near the wine shop. Good spot. Men gather there for a mid-morning drink, even though it's barely breakfast. Drunk by noon is practically a Roman virtue. You make eye contact with a boy barely past 20 who's holding a goblet like it's a trophy. He smirks. You raise an eyebrow barely. That's enough to reel him in. He stumbles closer, asking in Latin if you're open for a little mythology lesson. That's his code for something he read in a scroll and now wants to try out poorly. You answer in perfect Greek only if you promise not to confuse Zeus with Bacchus again. His eyes widen. Hook, line, sinker. Historians still argue whether Roman prostitutes leaned into performance or were forced into one. What they miss is this performance is the job. You're not a blank canvas. You're a moving mural, and every client paints his fantasy onto your surface, then walks away, leaving you to scrub off whatever image he left behind. The boy pays up front. He wants a quick talk and a soft touch. Easy enough. You guide him behind the shop into the shaded nook with the smooth stone wall. There you sit, legs tucked demurely, eyes half-lidded. You tell him the story of Daphne and Apollo, but you tweak the ending. This time Daphne turns into a laurel and then kicks Apollo in the face. He laughs too hard and tries to kiss you. You lean away just enough to remind him he paid for a moment, not a romance. After he leaves lighter in step and lighter in purse, you sit a moment longer. You catch your breath, wipe your hands on your tunic, sip from the water skin you hide behind the crate, and then it begins again. Another man approaches, this one older, slow in his movements, smelling of incense and candle wax. A priest, maybe, or just a pious fraud. He doesn't speak, just hands you a coin. You tilt your head. He mouths the word, comfort. You understand. You've seen men like him before. You lead him to the alley where the wall is warm and the ground is dry. You let him rest his head on your lap. You don't talk. You just run your fingers through his thinning hair until he exhales like someone let go of a rope he's been clutching for years. He leaves without a word. You don't expect one. That's another part of the pitch, the silent roles. Sometimes being quiet earns you more than all the clever lines in the world. You learn to read men by what they don't say. Some want a mirror. Some want a mother. Some want someone to hurt. And some, just a few, want someone to pretend they're still alive. You remember once an old scholar paid you 5 denarii just to let him teach you philosophy. He quoted Plato while stroking your hand. You didn't understand most of it. He didn't care. That wasn't the point. The point was that someone listened. And here's the strange thing, you did learn something. He said, the soul craves beauty, but settles for comfort. That stuck with you. You return to the main path. Subura is louder now. Someone's shouting about stolen figs. A vendor is offering goat cheese at emperor's prices. You ignore it all. A group of soldiers clatters past, half drunk, already boasting about who broke more bones at yesterday's training. One sees you and nudges another. That's the smart one, he says. Tells stories while you... He trails off. The rest laugh. You don't. They move on and you breathe out slowly. One of the girls joins you, Sarah. She's older, maybe 30, which in your world makes her an oracle. She eyes you, then smirks. Greek again today seemed safer than Egyptian, you reply. She chuckles. I did Egyptian last week. Client asked if I'd been embalmed. You both laugh too loud, too sudden. It's not funny, but it is something. She leans closer. Word is the censor's son is prowling today. Be careful. He likes to leave marks. The kind that don't fade. You nod. You'll avoid the marble stairs and the silk-sandaled types today. Stick to the corners. Safer in the shadows. Sarah leaves with a client, and you're alone again. The performance resets. You adjust your tunic, smooth your face, paint on a new smile. A poet once said that Rome is a city of masks. You believe it. Yours just happens to be pinned to your skin. The sun climbs higher, dragging the weight of the day behind it. The light slants sharper now, bouncing off clay tiles and blinding anyone foolish enough to look up. You squint, tug your tunic higher up the shoulder. It's already slipping again, no matter how often you adjust it, and step toward the makeshift dressing corner behind the taverna. This is the part of the job that rarely makes it into stories, the sheer maddening amount of maintenance. Because by mid-morning, you're already halfway undone, hair damp with sweat, face smudged with dust, tunic clinging to you in all the wrong places. So it's time to repaint the illusion. Again. There's a wooden table propped up on bricks, a chipped mirror perched crookedly on top. Around it, a cluttered lineup of cosmetics, lead paste, soot-stained ash, crushed rose petals, animal fat. You know this table like you know the sound of your own breath. Each item a friend, a weapon, a trap. You begin with the face. Lead-based foundation, chalky white and dangerously sweet-smelling, is smeared across your cheeks. It makes your skin look smooth under lamplight, but you know the price. You've seen girls whose faces bloomed in blisters. Historians still debate whether they knew how dangerous it was. You're telling you right now everyone knows. We just need the coin more than we need the skin. Next, rouge. You pinch your cheeks for a natural flush, then dab on the powdered red chalk to seal the lie. Your lips get a smear of carmine made from crushed insects mixed with honey. It tastes like bitterness and bees. Now comes the tricky part, your eyebrows. They're gone. You plucked them this morning with clamshells like every other morning. You paint new ones higher than your real arch to widen the eyes. The effect more desirable, or so the madam insists. You call it what it is, face forgery. For your eyes, a smudge of soot carefully applied with a bone needle. One wrong move and you'll look like a startled owl. Or worse, cry from the sting and ruin the whole canvas. And then there's the perfume. You dab a thin trail of spikenard behind your ears and wrists, and a hint of cinnamon oil on your neck. It smells warm, almost festive, which makes a strange contrast to the cold detachment you've been rehearsing all morning. You reach into your satchel for the final detail, a small piece of chalkstone you've shaved into a delicate triangle. It serves as a tooth whitener, though it tastes like the god's punishment for vanity. You grind it gently between your teeth, then spit the dust behind the bushes. At your feet, a lizard skitters across the stone. You watch it disappear into a crack in the wall and envy its freedom. No makeup, no clients, no act. A girl named Melia appears beside you, frowning at her reflection in the mirror you're holding. "Do I look more Greek or more Illyrian?" she asks. You study her, more like someone who skipped breakfast. She laughs, then picks up a wig from the table. It's auburn full and curled, fashioned from horsehair and dyed with henna. She pins it on in 3 practiced motions. You opt for your simpler piece, a black coif with a slight wave tucked under a gold-threaded ribbon that isn't real gold, but shimmers just enough to fool most eyes. There's an art to every layer you put on. A kind of defiance buried beneath the silk and soot. People call it vanity. You call it armor. Melia leans in. You heard about the girl from the Aventine, you nod. Everyone has. A client strangled her, then claimed she was trying to rob him. No trial, no justice, just silence. Another name added to the list no one writes down. You finish your look with a gentle puff of white powder down your neck and chest. It gives the illusion of softness. It makes the bruises harder to see. A philosopher once told you that beauty is the shadow of truth. You asked him how much shadow he wanted, and he paid double. You emerge from behind the taverna like a performer taking the stage. Shoulders, square eyes, half-lidded lips, parted in suggestion or curiosity, whatever the moment demands. You are no longer the girl who scrubbed floors in her mother's house, or the one who once cried through her first week in this city. That girl's been powdered out. A group of men passes by, loud and reeking of figs and bravado. One whistles. One mutters something about Venus walking. Another fumbles with a coin purse and tries to catch your eye. You keep your gaze fixed slightly above their heads, as if you're considering the weather. It drives them wild. You move to your usual corner near the sculptor's stall. The marble busts lining the display seem to judge you with their blank stares. Augustus, Nero, someone's grandmother, all expressionless, all unmoved. But a client approaches a new one. Early 30s, clean tunic fingers stained with ink. A scribe, maybe. He's nervous, which is always a good sign. Nervous clients pay in full and leave quickly. You like nervous. He clears his throat. Do you? You smile? Yes. He follows you without another word. Back in the small alcove, you keep your voice soft, your gestures graceful. He talks more than most babbles about scrolls and politics, and how he's not usually like this. You listen, or at least nod convincingly. His hands tremble when they touch you. When he leaves, he presses 5 coins into your palm, 1 extra, for listening. You tuck them away and lean against the cool wall, letting yourself rest for a moment. You catch your reflection in a silver platter nearby. You look perfect and completely unfamiliar. Historians often call your kind painted women. You think that's accurate, but they forget the deeper truth underneath all the paint, the makeup, the ash and powder. There's still you, barely, breathing, watching, waiting for the next cue. You're still dabbing sweat from your collarbone with the edge of your sleeve when you hear the soft clang of temple bells. It's faint, coming from the east near the Forum, but it's enough to stir something inside you. Maybe not reverence exactly, but routine. The temple of Venus Erycina calls, and you know what that means. Time to pay your respects, or at least pretend convincingly enough. You slip into the foot traffic near the tanner's stalls, where the air smells like death and vinegar, and make your way toward the Aventine Hill. Not for confession, not for forgiveness. Those aren't commodities in your line of work. You go for something quieter, older. A thread of hope spun from habit, worn smooth by so many women like you over so many years. The temple itself isn't grand, certainly not like Jupiter's or even Juno's, but it's yours, sort of. It belongs to the women who light incense before a long shift, who whisper into the void for just a few safe hours, and a client who doesn't ask for cruelty. You arrive at the steps just as a group of younger women is leaving. One still has ash on her cheeks from the purification ritual. She looks half scared, half proud. You remember that look. You wore it once, maybe the first time you stood here with clean feet and lies on your tongue. You climb the steps slowly. The marble is warm from the sun and smooth beneath your sandals. Inside it smells like lavender and old wax. Shadows dance across the stone walls cast by flickering oil lamps. A statue of Venus stands at the altar, carved in a posture that's more seductive than sacred hip-tilted smile half-formed. The kind of goddess who understands why your knees ache and your heart stings. You kneel because that's what you do. You light the stub of an incense stick you tucked into your belt this morning. Strike it against the flint near the altar and hold it until the smoke curls up like a question. Your prayer isn't long. You don't believe in miracles, but you believe in rhythm. You murmur Venus: if he's going to lie, let him lie gently. If he's going to pay, let him pay honestly. And if he's going to touch me, let him do it with clean hands. Someone coughs beside you. You glance to see a girl 16, maybe less. She fidgets with the hem of her tunic. First-timer, you can tell. Her face is scrubbed too hard, her lips stained too red. She looks like a doll someone played with too rough. You lean in, whisper, speak low. Don't look them in the eyes unless you want something, and always keep half the coin out of sight until he leaves. She nods like she'll remember. She won't. No one does at first. Historians still argue whether temples like this truly welcomed prostitutes or merely tolerated them. You know what it feels like, a sanctuary that neither judges nor absolves. Just one that watches quietly like the gods themselves. You leave the temple lighter somehow, not blessed, but steadied. You descend the steps and melt back into the crowd, just another face among many. The Aventine streets buzz with their own holy chaos, boys racing to deliver bread, a man haggling over incense, a dog barking at a goat for no clear reason. You decide to circle the long way home, taking the Via Nova through the merchant quarter. You like the colors here, dyed cloths hanging in doorways, spices piled in pyramids, fruits so ripe they bruise at the touch. You walk slowly, not trying to sell, just watching. A fabric seller calls out to you. "Beautiful tunic domina," he lies. You nod politely. He doesn't expect a response. It's all part of the dance. A toothless woman sells amulets from a tray slung around her neck. For protection, she promises. Against bad luck and worse men. You almost laugh. Almost. She presses a copper charm into your hand. "Free for you," she says. You have the eyes of someone who knows what you don't ask. You tuck the charm into your pouch. You've worn stranger things. By the time you reach the edge of the forum, it's high noon. The crowds thicken. Nobles in fine togas brush elbows with slaves carrying amphorae. A mime performs near a statue, his face white and frozen in mock agony. A small boy beside him juggles rotten apples. No one claps. You find a bit of shade under a fig tree near the steps of a closed taberna and sit. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because sometimes the world feels better when you're still. A young couple walks by giggling. The girl's hair is braided with ribbons. The boy carries a clay jug. They look sun-warmed and stupid. You envy them just enough to hate them for half a second. Then a shadow falls over you. You look up. A client. You recognize him, Lucius. Tall, balding, smells like mint and horses. Pays well, asks for quiet. "Afternoon," he says. "Afternoon." He doesn't ask for your name. He never has. You like that. Names complicate things. He tilts his head. "Room," you nod. "Same place," he nods. You both rise and walk without speaking, like old acquaintances with nothing left to explain. On the way, he offers you a fresh fig from his pouch. You take it. It's soft, ripe. The taste is sweet, the skin bursting with seeds. Funny, you think. Venus probably would have liked figs more than roses. You arrive at the edge of the fountain square, the one with the cracked lion's head, where the water never flows right. And that's where the first clients of the day usually begin to circle. Not the drunken soldiers or the dangerous types, those come later. Morning and early afternoon are for the quieter ones. The ones who murmur instead of shout. The ones who speak in veiled questions like, "Do you have a moment?" as if they're inviting you to tea, not trading coin for illusion. Today, the fountain trickles lazily, splashing onto worn tiles that have seen too many sandals and too few scrubbings. A group of street performers packs up nearby, one of them cursing softly as he collects bent coins and one unlucky tooth. Across the square, a baker throws stale crusts to pigeons who look too exhausted to fight over them. And you find your spot. A flat stone near the base of the fountain, angled to catch the shade. You sit with your knees tucked under your tunic, eyes drifting lazily over the crowd. You look like you're resting or waiting for a friend. But really, you're waiting for the right pair of eyes to linger half a heartbeat too long. And here he comes. He's not dressed like much, plain wool tunic, sandals worn thin at the heel. But you can tell he's not poor. His skin is clean, his nails trimmed, and his hair smells faintly of laurel oil. A freedman, maybe, or the son of a merchant. He doesn't speak right away. He just paces once around the fountain, then returns. Like a dog sniffing the edge of a trap he knows is baited, but still smells like dinner. When he stops in front of you, he clears his throat. "You're not like the others," he says, though of course you are. You let your eyes narrow just a little. "No," you say, "I charge more." He laughs, surprised. That's good. Surprise turns the moment personal. He'll remember it later. "Do you talk?" he asks. "Depends. On what?" "On whether you listen. That's enough." He offers 4 denarii and you accept. The two of you walk to a shaded alley nearby. No names, no need. As the ritual unfolds, his hands clumsy, yours practiced, you begin your real job reading him. You spot the tremble in his fingers, the twitch in his jaw. You shift your voice lower. Tell him a story about a fisherman's daughter who once tamed a sea god. It's nonsense, but he listens like it's scripture. When it's over, he sighs as if you've lifted something from his chest. "Thank you," he says, eyes wet. You nod. "Next time, bring a better ending." He leaves quieter than before. You return to the fountain, dip your fingers into the water. It's warm, not clean, but cool enough to wipe your wrists and the space beneath your collar. Around you, Rome pulses like a living animal. Carts creak past, merchants shout about honeyed dates, children scream with the joy of not yet knowing how hard this city can be. And then there's another man. This one's older. Graying beard, limp in one-leg tunic, fine but not gaudy. A senator, probably retired. You remember him. Last time he asked you to recite poetry while he traced patterns on your shoulder blade with an olive branch. Domina, he greets you with a mock bow. Still telling stories, you smile. Only to those who listen. He chuckles. "Do you remember Virgil's eclogues? Only the dirty ones," you reply, and that gets another laugh. He doesn't stay long, just long enough to press 2 coins into your palm and ask if you'll be at the forum tomorrow. You say maybe. You mean yes. He likes you because you remind him of a wife who probably never listened and a servant who probably couldn't speak. You understand your place in his theater. Historians still argue whether women like you wielded any real power or simply played pretend. But there's something undeniably powerful about the way you can tilt a man's mind off its axis with nothing more than a well-placed sentence or a perfectly timed sigh. And when you're done for the moment, when the client's thin and the sun starts leaning westward, you sit alone by the fountain. You close your eyes, let the wind play with your hair. You imagine another version of this life, you in clean linen, married to a spice seller with kind hands. Or maybe not married at all. Maybe you run a candle stall. Or a lending library. You don't even know if Rome has libraries, but you imagine one anyway. Then reality interrupts. A boy no older than 10 runs past and splashes you with fountain water. You flinch. He freezes. You expect a joke, maybe even a stone. But instead he says, "Sorry," and runs off. You wipe the water from your arms. For a moment, the coolness feels like a blessing. Another girl joins you, Julia, the one with hair the color of new copper, and a laugh that never quite reaches her eyes. "Good day," she asks. "Decent," you say. "You old man wanted me to dress like his dead wife. Said I looked like her." She shrugs. "I charge double." You both laugh. Not because it's funny, because it's real. Behind you, someone has etched a crude poem into the side of the fountain. She sings, she smiles, she opens the door, but never the heart. Not anymore. You wonder if it's about you. You hope it is. Better to be remembered as closed than never remembered at all. You finish wiping your arms, your skin damp from the fountain spray, and stand slowly. Your joints creak just a little, like a quiet reminder that softness wears down under weight, even the kind you can't see. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and adjust your tunic. The fabric clings now. Not enough to be seductive, just enough to be uncomfortable. It's lunchtime in Rome, which means you've got a decision to make: eat something solid and sit a while, or keep moving while the crowd thickens. The square is always busiest at this hour, but so is your stomach, and you've already earned enough for a modest meal. You decide on lentils, not glamorous, not expensive, but warm and filling. A few stalls down, there's an old woman named Antia who ladles thick brown stew into wooden bowls for a single denarius. You've eaten from her pots so often, she doesn't ask anymore, just nods and shuffles a bowl into your hands, with a chunk of bread already balanced across the top. You sit nearby on a carved stone block that used to be part of a temple column. Rome is full of pieces like that, once sacred, now seating. You eat slowly, not because you savor it, but because it's a moment when no one wants anything from you. Around you, other girls drift in and out of view, catching breaks between clients. You recognize faces: Livia with the limp, Julia with the too wide smile, Melia with the fake pearls. All of you eat in silence, like animals at a watering hole that might disappear any second. Across the square, a patrician woman eyes you with a mixture of disdain and something else: curiosity, recognition. She tightens her shawl and whispers to her companion. You don't look away. You hold her gaze just long enough to make her flinch. She turns, walks faster. That's always the tell. Here's the strange truth you learn over time. The same women who clutch their pearls at your presence are often the same ones sending their husbands back to you with a little extra coin and the request, make him feel important. Historians like to debate how Roman society viewed prostitutes, but you don't need scrolls to tell you. You see it in the way people look at you twice. First with hunger, then with shame. The shame is never yours. You've stopped accepting that burden. You finish your stew. The bread's gone soft, soaked in lentil broth. You eat it anyway. Waste nothing. That's rule number 1. As you rise, you hear a familiar voice behind you, hoarse, theatrical. It's Dama, one of the older women who's been around since before half the forum was paved. She stands near the shade of a fig cart, addressing no one in particular. I once had a senator cry into my lap because his wife wouldn't name their dog after him. That's the kind of power we have girls. Remember that? A few chuckles ripple through the square. Someone tosses her a coin. She bows dramatically. You smirk. Dama's been retiring for years. She still makes more than most of you. Nearby, a group of laborers is eating on the curb, eyeing you like you're on the menu. One calls out, "Smile for me, Venus." You don't. But you walk past slow enough to make him think you might later. That's how you play it. Not yes, not no, just maybe. You head back toward your regular route, the loop that curves from the fountain square to the shaded alleys near the baths, then back toward the Subura edge. A good circuit, plenty of foot traffic, plenty of chances. Halfway down the alley, you pass a young man leaning against a pillar. He's scribbling something onto a wax tablet. A poet, or at least someone pretending to be one. You slow, curious. He notices you and straightens. Do you know how many syllables are in "She wore sorrow like perfume"? He asks, not looking up from his wax. You tilt your head. 7. He grins. See, you're smarter than I am. Everyone is, you mutter, but not unkindly. He looks at you then. Really looks. Not with desire, not with pity, just interest. You work near here, he asks. Not work. Wander, you reply. I could write something for you, don't you say. Poems fade faster than bruises. He opens his mouth, closes it. You walk on. It's strange how often men want to immortalize you with words, but never ask your real name. You've had lines scrawled about your eyes, your laughter, your hands. None of them ever get it right. The best poem you ever heard was whispered once by a blind musician who couldn't even see you. He said you sound like someone who used to sing. You haven't sung in years. Not really. You reach the back corner of the circuit, the one near the tanners. The stench here is awful, rotting hides, boiling fat, but it keeps away the children and the gawkers. Only serious clients come this way, and the madam never checks here. It's unofficial, unclaimed. Yours. A man approaches, older, dressed in the brown cloak of a courier. He smells of dust and ink. He doesn't speak, just hands you a wax-sealed note and 5 denarii. You raise an eyebrow. Message, he says. You open it when he's gone. Just a name, Marius, and a room number. A time just after dusk. You crumple it and tuck it into your sash. You'll go. Not because the pay is good, it rarely is when they leave notes, but because curiosity is a luxury, and you can't afford to ignore it. The sun has begun to dip now, casting Rome in its golden disguise. The streets soften, the edges blur, and as you step back into the main road, you pass 2 noblewomen arguing over a bolt of imported silk. One of them glances at you, nostrils flaring. You smile at her, the real kind for once. Because as much as she'd like to believe otherwise, you both know the truth. You've both performed today. You just wore different costumes. The city changes color in the late afternoon. You feel it before you see it. Like Rome lets out a long, sticky sigh, slumping into its own shadows. The light goes gold, then copper, then bruise-colored in the corners of alleyways and under arches where the stones stay cool. You know this part of the day well. It's the in-between when the sun hasn't quite left, but the night's already whispering its name. And for you, it's time to head inside. The madam likes everyone back in the lupanar before the true evening rush. Not because she worries, because she counts. Coin girls, wine towels. Everything in her world has a number, and if something's missing, someone gets blamed. You push through the door, and the stale warmth wraps around you like an old robe wine sweat oil, maybe tears, depending on the hallway. It's not home, but it's yours. Inside, the common room is already flickering with lamplight. Livia's perched on a stool, plucking a stray thread from her tunic. Cassia leans against a pillar, pretending to nap, but watching everything. Always watching. Julia paces slowly, murmuring to herself, rehearsing maybe, or just keeping the voices in her head company. You pass them and head to your little room, the cubiculum. Just wide enough for a bed, a hook for your bag, and space to sit if your knees are feeling generous. The walls are covered with scribbles, some yours, most not. Little prayers, short poems, names real or otherwise. One reads, "She loved once, then learned better." You pull the curtain shut behind you. The linen is thin and does nothing for privacy, but it feels symbolic, a kind of soft boundary. You sit, pull off your sandals, and flex your feet. The arches ache. The heels sting. You rub them slowly with your thumbs, tracing circles that you barely feel anymore. Then knock knock. The madam's voice is muffled but sharp. Room 4, private. He paid up front. Be polite. That last part isn't advice. It's insurance. Her business runs smoother when no one screams. You slip on your tunic with the cleaner hem, straighten your hair, and tuck the charm from earlier, a small copper disc, into your sash. A silly thing maybe, but you feel better having it close. Room 4 is larger than most. Barely. There's a better oil lamp, thicker bedding, even a tray of dates on the table already half-eaten. And sitting on the edge of the bed is the man from the note, Marius. He's younger than you expected, late 30s maybe. Broad shoulders, a face that could have been carved into a coin if the Senate liked him more. He doesn't smile when you enter, just gestures to the chair. You read, he asks. You nod. Greek, you nod again. Better than Latin, actually. He seems to consider this like a merchant weighing figs. I don't want to. He waves vaguely. You know, not that tonight. You raise an eyebrow. You paid full. I don't need a refund, he says. I just want to hear something. That always makes your heart pause for half a second. Not the weird ones, not the dangerous ones, but the quiet ones. The ones who want something that doesn't cost coin. Those are the most unpredictable. Fine, you say, sitting down. Tell me what kind of story you need. He leans back, eyes fixed on the lamp. Tell me something true. You almost laugh. But instead you shift in the chair and begin. You tell him about a girl who once thought Rome was made of promises, who followed a man from a small coastal town to the capital, who lost the man, the promise, and the town in a single week, who started over with nothing but a bruised shoulder and a borrowed name. You don't use your voice from the streets. You use the one you keep tucked away. Lower rounder, the one that remembers lullabies. He listens, really listens. When you're done, he doesn't speak. He just nods once, as if he came to hear exactly that, and now he can go. He leaves you the full pouch anyway. After he's gone, you stay in the room a little longer. You eat one of the dates, even though you're not hungry. The sweetness sticks to your teeth. Historians still argue whether Roman brothels were only dens of vice or strange sanctuaries in their own way. You can answer that. It's both. Some nights are just commerce. Others feel like confessions, except no one's forgiven. Later, you return to your cubiculum. The oil lamp flickers low now. The hallway is quieter. Somewhere, someone is crying. Someone else is laughing too loudly. The contrast is typical. You pull your knees up to your chest, wrap your arms around them, and breathe. The city sounds change at night. More whispers, more sandals scraping stone. You hear a drunk man shouting at the moon and a street dog howling like it's in on the joke. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. There's a crack running through the plaster that looks like a river. You imagine floating down it past the Lupanar, past Subura, past the Tiber, and out to a place where no one asks for anything. You imagine silence, not the kind filled with waiting, the kind that feels like rest. And eventually, you drift off, not quite sleep, not quite alert, into the kind of in-between space that only women like you ever seem to find. Between client and self, between mask and skin, the silence doesn't last. It never does. You hear it before you open your eyes, sandals slapping against the stone floor in hurried rhythm, the shuffle of too many bodies in a hallway built for shadows, not traffic. Then the voice, sharp, clipped, the kind that doesn't care about sleep or dignity. The madam. Bathhouse girls up, if you've got a robe, wear it. If not, borrow one and keep moving. The night crowd's starting early. You groan. Of course. A noble's feast must have ended early, or someone wealthy got bored. In either case, it means side hustles tonight. And for you, that means the public baths. You rise, stretch, rub your neck. The straw mattress has left its usual constellation of red lines on your shoulder. You don't even bother changing tunics. Instead, you reach for your robe, a deep blue threadbare at the seams, but still good enough to pass for respectable. You fasten the sash and move quickly. The sooner you get there, the more you can choose your spot. It's all about position, just like in the streets, just like in life. The thermae is already glowing from within by the time you arrive. Steam curls out of the doorway like a beckoning ghost. You step inside and are greeted instantly by warmth, not just heat, but the damp, scented kind. Eucalyptus leaves float lazily in the water, and someone has lit frankincense. Either someone important is here, or someone pretending to be. Inside the baths, the rules shift. You're not a prostitute. Not officially. Here you're a masseuse, or a serving girl, or a listener. You wear your robe loosely, your expression looser. You offer cups of water, bowls of olives, small talk, shoulder rubs. Anything that buys you time and coin without stepping into a private stall. You walk the perimeter first, scan the benches. The clients here are different than your usuals. Wealthier, yes, but also more careful. Everything is performance. The way they recline, the way they hold their goblets, the way they pretend they don't recognize you. You spot a familiar figure reclining by the far pool Decimus, a former tribune with a soft stomach and a fondness for poetry, especially when he reads it. Badly. You glide toward him like a cloud of intention. When he notices you, he smiles. Ah, my muse returns. You dip your head. Only if there's coin to inspire me. He chuckles. There always is. You sit beside him, legs tucked beneath your robe. He hands you a fig. You take it. He's drunk, but not slurring yet. He begins reciting something about the moon's blush upon thy cheek. You nod at the right moments. Offer a soft, here a how lovely there. He doesn't care that you're not listening. He cares that you're here. Historians often dismiss these bathhouse visits as mere leisure. But there's economy in every glance, every lean, every compliment whispered over warm water. Tonight, Decimus gives you a coin before you even stand. For listening, he says, and for not correcting my Latin. You wink. That'll cost extra next time. You move on. In the next chamber, the air thickens with steam. The heat presses against your skin like a second robe. A younger client catches your eye, boyish face, barely old enough to have chest hair, but wealthy enough to believe he owns the room. He gestures. You approach. Rub, he asks, pointing to his shoulders. You nod. Kneel behind him. Your hands press gently, then more firmly moving in practiced circles. He hums in approval. You say nothing. As you work, you spot another girl across the room, Nysa, with the braided hair and quiet hands. She's serving wine to a group of older men, each one speaking over the other like senators without a forum. She catches your eye, rolls hers. You suppress a laugh. That's the closest thing to gossip you'll get tonight. The boy's skin is slick with sweat. You reach for a cloth and gently dab his shoulders. He sighs. You're good, he murmurs. Better if you tip, you reply. He nods, sleepy now. You finish, step back, and his servant drops a small coin into your hand. Not much, but you'll take it. You exit the steam room and sit briefly by the fountain in the atrium. Your robe clings to your back. You press a cold goblet of water to your forehead and close your eyes. Just for a second. That's when you hear a voice, familiar, too familiar. Well, if it isn't the philosopher courtesan herself. You open your eyes. It's Marcus, not a client, not anymore. But once he was. And worse, he was almost something else. He's leaning against a column, hair damp, eyes sharp. He always spoke in riddles. Always paid too little. Always lingered too long. I was hoping to find you, he says. I wasn't hoping the same, you reply, standing. He steps closer. I missed your stories, and I missed being believed. You snap before you can stop yourself. He raises a brow. Still bitter. Still standing, you say. Which is harder. He laughs. Not kindly. I'm glad to see Rome hasn't softened you. Rome doesn't soften, you say. It carves. He reaches into his pouch, drops a coin into your hand. For the memory. You don't thank him. He leaves and you exhale. Some clients haunt you more after they leave than when they stayed. Marcus is one of those. A man who wanted more than your body, but only so he could control the rest. You finish your shift near the cold pool where a pair of brothers are arguing over whose slave is faster. You pretend not to listen. You refill goblets. You compliment their sandals. You earn 2 coins and a leftover fig. By the time you leave, the moon is rising heavy and orange above the rooftops. You walk back slowly, sandals whispering against the stones. Back at the lupanar, the hallway is quiet. Someone's singing faintly. A lullaby, maybe. Or a hymn. You slip into your room, untie your sash, and sit on the edge of your bed. Tonight, your hands earned more than your body, but your body still aches. You lie down, close your eyes, and try not to dream of steam or Marcus or water that never cools. The night deepens, and Rome breathes differently now. You feel it in the way the air presses through the slats of your window cooler, quieter, thick with the hush of things unsaid. The streets outside don't sleep, not exactly, but they murmur instead of shout. And those who wander this late are either desperate or dangerous, often both. You don't sleep yet. Not when the coin still jingles faintly in your pouch and the ache in your legs hasn't quite settled. This is the strange part of the evening, the time between effort and rest, when your mind wanders into places your body can't follow. You sit by the little table in your room, oil lamp burning low, and begin to count the day's denarii. 1, 2, 3, pause, 4, 5. One more than you expected, tucked into your sash by the old priest who didn't say a word. A quiet tip, perhaps. Or a small thank you for letting him cry without asking why. It's during this counting that your mind inevitably drifts to the men who pass through your life, like shadows under torchlight. Some of them you forget before the door closes, but others, oh the others, they stay. There was a soldier once named Gaius, broad-shouldered, loud, full of stories about Gaul and the kind of honor that only shows up after 3 cups of spiced wine. He kissed your palm after paying you, and then told you about the wife he hadn't written to in 6 months. You remember him because he wept when he left. And the scholar Petronius, maybe, he always smelled of ink and mint leaves. He would ask you to correct his grammar while he undressed, muttering about Julius Caesar's sentence structure. He said you had a mouth like an epigram. You don't know if that was an insult or a compliment. You liked him anyway. Then there was the senator. Always in a hurry, always checking the curtain. He tipped well but never said your name. Or his. He came 3 times a week for a month. Then never again. You found out later he died of a heart attack at the amphitheater mid-sentence during a speech about family values. Historians love categories military, elite, plebeian. You don't. To you, they're sweaty palms, shifting eyes, and questions they're afraid to ask their wives. You think back to one man in particular, a scribbler. Thin, nervous, not especially bright, but kind. Really kind. He brought you a peach once. Not to impress you, just because he thought you might like the taste. You didn't see him again after that week. Someone said he joined a monastery. You hope that's true. He looked like someone who needed quiet. Cassia once said that clients are like stains on a tunic. Some fade with scrubbing, some stay, no matter how much ash you use. You think she's right. Some faces are still with you when you close your eyes. Not because of what they did, but because of what they didn't do. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes now. Just for a minute. But instead of sleep, memory floods in. Laughter, breath, a hand lingering too long, a whispered secret, a bruised wrist, a fig pressed into your palm, the scent of old wine and goat leather. There's a knock at your curtain. You open your eyes. Client in room 6, the madam calls. Asked for you by name. You don't groan. You just stand. Another shift. Another mask. You pass Julia in the hall. She raises an eyebrow. Busy night. You nod. Name request. Room 6. She winces. That's the one who always smells like sea salt. You smile. At least he smells like something natural. She chuckles. May the gods bless your patience. You enter room 6. The man is already there, late 30s, sand-colored beard hands, like someone who once worked but doesn't anymore. He nods at you. Doesn't speak. That's fine. Silence is easier than small talk. He lies back. You begin. Not fast, not slow. Just enough. Halfway through, he says, "Do you remember me?" You pause. Look at him closely. Maybe, but you shake your head. No, sorry. He nods, eyes far away. That's all right. I just needed to be forgotten by someone who doesn't hate me. You don't ask. He pays more than he owes. You leave. Back in your room, you find that the oil lamp has gone out. You light it again. The wick crackles as if annoyed to be disturbed. You sit once more and finish your earlier thoughts, cataloging in your mind the senators, soldiers, and scribblers. They all want something. Most don't know what. Some just want to be seen. Others hope you never look too closely. Historians still argue whether clients of Roman prostitutes sought connection or control. You could answer that in a sentence: they came for the illusion of choice, and left hoping you believed their lies more than they did. You tuck the coins into a small cloth pouch and tie it to your belt. One more night survived, one more mask worn, and still you lie back on your mattress and wonder what would they say if they saw you now alone in a room barely big enough for your thoughts. Would they still call you Venus, or would they finally use your real name? You wake before the sun again. Not because you want to, but because Rome never truly sleeps, and your body has long learned the rhythm of survival rest in fragments. Wake in shadows, move before the world sees you as still. Your back aches in the same place it always does, right where the straw in your mattress has thinned to nothing. You stretch slowly, trying not to groan aloud. A girl crying in the room next to yours makes that difficult. You don't know her name yet. She's new. You make a note to give her the peppermint oil if she makes it to the end of the week. You light the lamp. The wick flares, then steadies. Another day begins, but something's off. You sense it before you even move to wash. There's tension in the air, thick and quiet. The kind that wraps around your ankles when you walk and whispers, "Not yet." It clicks when you step into the hallway and find Livia standing against the wall, arms crossed, face blank. "She's gone," Livia says. "Who, the girl?" "The new one. The one from Gaul. With the curls." You blink. Gone where Livia shrugs. Some say she ran. Others say she was taken. You know what taken means, and you know what ran really means. Neither ends well. There's blood near the door, just a smear, but enough. You inhale. Slow. Deep. Rome eats people. That's not poetic. It's just fact. Some get chewed slowly. Others are swallowed whole. You return to your room and wash anyway. You dab rose oil behind your ears. You adjust your tunic. You slide the hairpin into place with fingers that barely tremble. Because what else can you do? You step out into the morning with the city already heaving around you, oxen carts creaking over stone, fishmongers shouting over buckets, dogs sniffing for scraps. And there by the fountain, a familiar figure waits, Lucius the scribe with the ink-stained fingers and the two serious eyes. You almost don't approach, but he sees you and smiles, not the crooked, hungry grin of most men, but something softer, like a sigh. "May I walk with you?" he asks. You nod. "Only if you bring better questions than yesterday." He chuckles. "I've been reading Ovid." You groan. "That's not better." You walk together, weaving between vendors and piles of amphorae past the bakery that always burns the crusts and the alley where Dama once claimed she saw a ghost. "Do you ever regret it?" he asks suddenly. You raise an eyebrow. "Regret what this life?" You stop walking, slowly turn to him. "Do you regret having hands that can't hold a sword or a back that bends over scrolls instead of under shields?" He swallows. "That's not the same." "It's exactly the same," you say. You play the role you were handed. If you're lucky, you get to edit the script a little. He doesn't respond, just looks at his feet. "I'm sorry," he murmurs. You wave him off. "Don't be. Just don't pretend you understand. It's not flattering." Historians still argue whether women like you saw themselves as victims or participants. You wish they'd stop asking the question like it's either or. You leave Lucius near the forum. He says something about seeing you later. You nod but don't commit. You wander toward the temples drawn by the scent of burnt offerings. You stop by the steps of Venus Cloacina's shrine, not the grand Venus, but the one tied to sewers, to cleansing, to things people pretend not to think about. You find comfort in that. You whisper a quiet prayer, not for the new girl, not even for yourself, just for stillness. When you return to the Subura district, the mood has shifted. Men mutter about a brawl in the market. A child wails near the grain stand. Someone's body was found by the aqueduct. You don't ask for details. You already know enough. Cassia pulls you aside. Her face is pale, her voice urgent. "They're looking for someone," she whispers. "They think one of us saw something." Saw what? She shakes her head. A senator, a fight, a mistake. You blink. Hard. You did see something. Last night, just before you closed your curtain, a man in dark robes, blood on his collar, dragging another by the tunic. You thought it was a drunken quarrel. You didn't think it was that. You don't say anything. Not yet. Cassia exhales. "Be careful." You nod. And suddenly you are hyper-aware of every gaze, every guard, every stranger's hand hovering too close to your side. You retreat to the edge of the district, to the quieter alleyways. Not because you're hiding, because you need to think. You sit on a barrel behind the dye shop, the scent of indigo clinging to your sleeves. You count your breaths. A boy passes. Dirty-faced, no older than 10. He pauses. "Are you the lady who tells stories?" You nod. "Tell me one." You smile against your own better judgment. "All right," you say. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who lived in a city of lions, but she learned how to walk like one." The boy's eyes widen. "Did she roar?" You lean in, whispering. "She didn't have to." He grins, runs off. You sit there a moment longer, listening to the city breathe. And you wonder who saw you today. Not the mask, not the curve, not the walk. Just you. Maybe no one. Maybe that's the point. You spend the rest of the afternoon walking in wide arcs. Not out of habit, not for work this time. It's for safety. That quiet kind of survival instinct that tells you when it's time to move like a shadow and not like a person. Because the mood in the streets is different today. Heavier. Too many questions hanging in the air like linen on a line that'll never dry. You pass soldiers twice. Once near the wine market, two of them questioning the fruit sellers who answer with overacted shrugs and eyes that glance everywhere but toward the alley where the bloodstain never fully washed out. And again, near the baths, where a legionnaire with a face like carved wood is scribbling names into a wax tablet. He doesn't look up as you walk past, but your spine still prickles as if he did. It's not paranoia if it keeps you alive. So you avoid your usual corner. Skip the fountain. Instead, you head to the upper end of the Subura, where the clientele is more discreet and the walls echo less. You spend your time sitting on a broken marble bench near a collapsed archway. A decent lookout spot. You can see the street from here, and more importantly, see who's watching you. Cassia joins you around mid-afternoon. She's carrying a piece of flatbread stuffed with olives and goat cheese. She doesn't offer you any. That means she's scared. She sits, tearing the bread slowly, mouth tight. They've got names, she says, not looking at you. You nod. Ours maybe. Maybe just girls who've been in the wrong places. You almost laugh. That's all of us. She doesn't laugh. One of them described a girl with black hair and a gold-threaded ribbon. You reach up instinctively, touch your own ribbon, the one you've worn all week. Did they say what she saw? Cassia shakes her head. Just that she was seen. That's enough. You think about the alley again. The man with blood on his collar. The one dragging the other like a sack of flour. You remember the way he looked over his shoulder. Not to check if he was being followed, but to make sure he was seen. That detail sticks now, unsettles you. Historians still argue whether prostitutes in Rome acted as passive witnesses or willing informants. They miss the point entirely. You're not one or the other. You're both, and neither. You see everything. You say nothing, until silence is no longer safe. Cassia finishes her bread and rises. She doesn't say goodbye. You don't expect her to. You stay on the bench a while longer. Watching, thinking. Not planning because plans get people killed, but calculating, adjusting. Ready to become whatever keeps you breathing by tomorrow. And just when you've decided to move to circle back toward the lupanar, you see him. The same man from the alley. The one with the bloodied collar. He's standing at the end of the street near the olive vendor. Clean now. Different tunic. No obvious stain. But the face, stern, square jaw, the scar that tugs the edge of his mouth like he's always about to sneer. You don't forget faces like that. He doesn't walk toward you. He doesn't call out. He just watches. For a second, you wonder if he's recognized you. But no. His gaze moves past. Through. He doesn't see you. He sees what you are. Replaceable. You wait until he turns, disappears into the crowd. Then you move. Not fast, not slow, just steadily. You take the back way through the dye alley past the washerwomen who are too busy beating tunics against stone to ask questions. You cut behind the spice house and past the temple ruins where the old statue of Minerva lies on its side, blind and forgotten. When you reach the lupanar, you duck into the common room and find the madam counting coins. She doesn't look up. Don't go near the forum, you say. She raises an eyebrow. Why, there's a man, looking. She scoffs. There are always men looking. You step closer. This one doesn't want a girl. He wants silence. That gets her attention. She puts down the coins. You sure? You nod. I saw him. I know what I saw. She studies you, then exhales through her nose. Stay inside tonight, she says. You're off the floor. Room and back. Don't talk to anyone who asks questions. You nod. She's protecting her investment, not you. But for now, that's enough. You retreat to the back room. It's rarely used, reserved for girls who are too sick to work or too bruised to look presentable. The walls here are quieter. The air smells like damp cloth and candle stubs. You sit, pull your knees up, try to breathe slowly, and then the knock comes. Not the madam, not a girl, a client. You don't move. You don't answer. The knock comes again. Then silence. You count to 50 in your head before letting your shoulders relax. Later, someone slides a bowl of lentils and bread under the curtain. You eat in silence. You lie down on the cot. It creaks. Outside, the world moves without you. You let it. Because tonight, survival isn't about seduction. It's about staying unseen, unheard, unremarked. And that too is part of your job. The air grows heavier after dark, thick with the kind of silence that listens. You stay curled on the cot in the back room, arms around your knees, the bowl of lentils half-eaten on the floor beside you. You've heard nothing more since the knock, no footsteps, no whispers, not even Livia humming her off-key lullaby down the hall. That quiet makes you more nervous than noise ever could. You've lived in Rome long enough to know that danger rarely arrives with fanfare. It creeps, lurks, poses as something mundane until it doesn't. Your fingers trace the hem of your tunic, a nervous habit. You remember the girl from Gaul again. Curls, eyes too bright, blood by the door. No body, no witnesses, gone. She wasn't the first, she won't be the last. You lie down, turn toward the wall, and breathe slowly. Your cheek presses against the cool stone. There's a tiny bit of graffiti there. Someone etched the word vivere in thin, scratchy letters. To live. That's all it says. Not how, not why. Just the verb naked and hopeful. You trace the letters with your fingertip, mouthing them silently like a prayer. Eventually, you sleep. A shallow, twitching kind of sleep that barely tugs you under. And in that not-quite dream, you're walking the same alleys, only they're empty. Everyone is gone. No clients, no girls, no guards. Just stone and wind and scraps of laughter blowing like leaves. You're still wearing your ribbon, though. Still carrying your little pouch. Still performing, even when there's no one left to watch. When you wake, the lamp has gone out again. You sit up. Listen. Nothing. You crack open the curtain and peer into the hallway. Dim light from the front room spills down the corridor, casting long shadows. You hear footsteps measured slow, not familiar. You duck back in. Then the voice. Her name is Lucia. That's what she told me. Black hair. Ribbon. Your heart hammers once, just once, and then goes still. They're talking about you. You don't know who they are, but that's not important. You know the tone. The way people talk when they think the walls aren't listening. She saw it, the voice says. She might talk. She won't, says another older. They never do. Even so, we can't have... The words fade as they walk off. You sit on the floor, hands cold, eyes dry. You think about that moment again, the man dragging the body, the blood, the way he wanted someone to see, and how you, without meaning to, became the one. You breathe, in, out. Now what you can leave, run. But to where you have no family in this city. You've long burned the bridges to your past, and Rome is a wheel. If you're not inside it, you're under it. Or you could talk. But to whom the authorities they already know. They are the authorities. Telling the truth in Rome is like whispering into a storm. It doesn't stop anything. It just makes you a target. Still, silence isn't safety anymore. You think of the other girls, Cassia, Livia, Julia, Melia and her cracked tooth. You think of the ones who went missing without explanation. The ones no one bothered to look for. The ones whose stories live only in the scribbled graffiti in back rooms. You think of how you're still here, and how maybe, just maybe, that means something. You stand, smooth your tunic, untie your ribbon, let your hair fall. You walk to the mirror, just a shard of bronze mounted on the wall, and look at yourself. You don't look like a hero. You don't look like a witness. You look like a girl with too many stories and not enough ears to tell them to. But you lift your chin anyway. Because tonight, danger hasn't passed. But fear has. You step out into the hallway. The air is colder now. You pass the madam's room, her door's ajar. She's counting coins again. Always counting. She sees you, raises an eyebrow. You're supposed to be resting. You nod. I was. Now I'm not. She watches you, says nothing. She knows better than to ask questions when someone speaks in full sentences. You pass into the front room. The candles burn low. The street outside is quiet. You sit by the window, not to wait, not to watch, just to be seen. A client passes, then another. But you stay still. And eventually, a man in uniform walks by, pauses, looks at you. He squints. You smile, soft, small. He nods, walks on. You exhale. You may not know what happens next. You may not know whether tomorrow holds a name, a client, a breath. But tonight, you're not the girl who saw and stayed silent. You're the one who stayed awake. And in Rome, sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. The next morning arrives, not with sunlight, but with noise. You wake to shouting in the street, men arguing, the clatter of overturned crates, a donkey braying like it's narrating the scene. You sit up slowly, heart already picking up speed, mind scanning for danger before your feet touch the floor. But it's just Rome being Rome again. The window shows the sky painted a muddy gray. A storm might be coming, or maybe just another heat-thick day that makes everything stick, clothes, sweat, thoughts. You get dressed without thinking. Tunic, sash, ribbon, though a different one this time. A muted brown instead of gold. After last night, it feels safer to go unnoticed again. Out in the hallway, the usual murmurs return, Cassia complaining about her heel, Julia practicing her innocent widow routine, the madam yelling at someone for breaking a comb. You exhale slowly, letting the normalcy settle back around you like old smoke. At breakfast, if you can call dried figs and barley bread breakfast, Livia sits beside you. She doesn't say much, just tears her bread into strips and offers you one. Still breathing, she mutters. For now. She glances sideways. You hear about the girl from Temple Street? You shake your head. Gone. 2 nights ago. Same pattern. You chew, swallow, and nothing, she says. No guards asked, no clients remembered her name. You don't say the obvious, they never do. You finish eating and make your way to your corner near the dye shop. The smell of boiling pigment fills the air, thick and sweet and sharp like flowers soaked in vinegar. You lean against the wall and let yourself blend in. For a moment, you're just part of the scenery. Another woman in a tired tunic, another pair of eyes watching the street. And that's when something strange happens. A client from 3 months ago, a quiet one, older, often wore blue, passes by. He sees you, stops, approaches. You cut your hair, he says. You didn't. But he thinks you did. You nod anyway. I almost didn't recognize you, he says. That would have been a shame. You smile politely, already gauging his mood. But instead of offering coin or asking about rooms, he just stands there, fidgeting. You ever think about leaving? He asks suddenly. You raise an eyebrow. Every day. You offering, he hesitates. No. I mean, sorry. Just curious. You wait. I had a sister, he says, voice low. She ran away to Rome when I was a boy. They said she ended up somewhere like here. You meet his eyes, carefully. I hope she did, you say, because here at least we're still alive. He swallows, nods, leaves. You watch him go and wonder if he'll come back. Not for services, but for closure. That happens sometimes. Not often, but enough. Back at the Lupanar, the day continues. Another client, another negotiation, another performance. This one is an officer, sharp chin, sharper tongue. He wants to be praised, worshipped, called something ridiculous like Invictus. You oblige. You say the lines. You keep the scratches shallow. You leave with 5 denarii and no lasting bruises. Historians still argue whether Roman prostitutes considered their clients necessary evil or minor gods. The truth: most of them are just interruptions, chapters in a book that never ends, pages that turn without asking if you're ready. Later that day, you find yourself back at the fountain. It's quieter now. A breeze stirs the water. You sit beside a statue of a nymph pouring from a jar worn so smooth her features have vanished. A poet sits nearby, scribbling into a wax tablet. You glance at him. He glances back. "Do you want a verse?" he asks. "No." He nods. "Good. I'm out of clever ones anyway." You chuckle, not because it's funny, but because it is something. He puts his tablet away. They say the emperor once disguised himself and visited a brothel for inspiration. You smirk. Did he find it? The poet shrugs. He left with a poem and a limp. You laugh for real this time. The sound surprises you. "Write that one," you say. He grins. "Already did." You stay a few minutes longer, letting the breeze cool your cheeks. The poet leaves. The fountain trickles. The statue keeps pouring. You think about the clients again. Not just the ones you served, but the ones you remember. There was the baker who always brought warm rolls and never asked for anything. The widower who cried every time he spoke his wife's name. The boy with the crooked teeth who paid just to talk. The soldier who drew a map of Spain on your back with his fingertip and promised to return. He didn't, but you remember the map. And that's what stays with you. Not the axe, not the coin, but the quiet between. You rise, return home. And that night before sleep takes you, you whisper one name into the darkness. Not because you miss him, but because someone should remember. And tonight, that someone is you. The day after, the fountain feels heavier, not because of anything you can see or hear, but because of something in the air. A pressure. Like Rome itself is waiting to exhale. You wake up feeling it before your feet touch the floor. There's no knock, no summons. But you know today isn't for routine. You dress slower than usual, not lazily, carefully. You choose your simpler tunic, the one with the clean hem and faded rose trim. You leave your ribbon behind. You braid your hair tight and tuck it under a linen wrap. Today, you want to be less. Outside, the streets are restless. There's shouting near the baths, but no crowd forms. Just tension. Like everyone knows not to get too close. You pass a boy selling figs who doesn't call out his prices. A vendor sweeping his stall instead of haggling. Eyes dart. Conversations pause when guards walk by. You keep walking. At the edge of the forum, a familiar voice calls to you, Lucius, the scribe. He's out of breath, eyes wide. They've arrested someone, he says, grabbing your arm. They think she saw it. Your blood chills. Who? A girl from the Lupanar. Short hair. From Capua, maybe. You curse under your breath. Not because you know her, but because it's always a girl with a name no one quite remembers. Lucius looks at you carefully. It wasn't you. I know that. But I also know you know who it was. You don't respond. He steps closer. They're planning to make an example of her, publicly. You turn to leave. He grabs your wrist again. You could stop it. You pull free. No, I could join her. That's what happens to girls who speak. He doesn't follow. You walk away, fast. You make it halfway back to the Lupanar before guilt catches you. Not the sentimental kind, the survival kind. Because if they're accusing her, then they're not done searching. And if they search enough, your face, your silence might not hold. You duck into a side street, one you haven't used in weeks. It smells like wet wood and iron. You walk it anyway. At the end is the small stall with a red awning, Lady Nona's. She's no oracle, but she knows things. The kind of things whispered over boiled herbs and dice. She looks up when you approach. You're late. You blink. I didn't say I was coming. She smirks. No one does. You sit. She brings out the tiny cup of bitter tea she always serves to people who don't ask questions. You sip it. I need to disappear, you say finally. She tilts her head. Forever or just the week you don't answer? She nods. There's a family in Trastevere. They need a house girl. Just cleaning. No questions. You'd have to cut your hair. You touch your braid instinctively. And forget your name, she adds. You hesitate. This city has carved that name into you with every coin, every bruise, every poem scrawled on the lupanar walls. To lose it feels like cutting off a limb, but keeping it might get you killed. Lady Nona pours more tea. It's not a clean life, she says, but it's quieter. You nod slowly. I'll think about it. She shrugs. Don't think too long. Rome eats slow thinkers. You leave her stall with the address tucked in your sash. When you return to the lupanar, the girls are gathered in the common room. No one's working. No one's talking. She's gone, Cassia says softly. The Capuan girl. They took her this morning. No charges, no trial. Any blood, you ask? Cassia shakes her head. Not yet. You sit with them. Just for a while. Then without fanfare you stand. Go to your room. Pack your pouch. The coins, the ribbon, the copper charm, the old letter from a poet who left for Greece and never returned. You leave the rest. And when the madam sees you walking toward the back door, she narrows her eyes. Going out, not sure you say. She doesn't stop you. She never does. And you step out not just into the alley, but into something new. Not safety, not hope, but possibility. Historians never write about the ones who walk away quietly. They remember names carved into stone, not the girls who changed theirs to survive. But you remember. And as you cross the bridge toward Trastevere, hair tucked tight pouch, warm against your side, you whisper your name one last time, then let it go. Trastevere greets you like a stranger pretending to be kind. The air here smells different, less wine and sewage, more river mud and fig leaves. The cobblestones are still cruel to tired feet, but they feel less judgmental somehow, like they haven't memorized every part of your story yet. You walk with your head low braid, cut short, and tucked beneath a modest linen scarf. No rouge, no ribbon, no eye contact. You're no one now. That's the plan. The house sits near the back of a narrow lane tucked behind a courtyard where chickens scratch in the dust, and an olive tree leans as if eavesdropping. It belongs to an older couple, Sabinus and Livia. They don't ask questions when you arrive. Just glance at the note from Lady Nona, then show you to the sleeping mat in the corner of the storage room. You sweep, Sabinus says. You carry water. You say little. You nod. Livia adds, and no visitors. You nod again. And just like that, you become someone else. The days in Trastevere follow a simpler rhythm wake. With the chickens fetch water from the well, sweep the courtyard, wash linens in cold water that makes your hands ache. Your fingers grow raw, your back stiffens, but no one touches you. No one asks for performances. That silence feels heavier than you expected, like wearing clothes a size too big. At night, you lie on the mat and stare at the beams in the ceiling. There's a hole near the edge where a gecko peeks out some evenings. You name it Titus just to have something to say aloud when no one's listening. The days stretch, then blur. One morning, while scrubbing soot from the clay stove, you overhear Sabinus whispering to a visitor, about a girl who vanished from the Subura. They say she saw something, maybe even someone important. The visitor spits on the ground. Then she's dead. Or smarter than we thought. You don't flinch, but later you press your forehead to the wall and breathe through your teeth. Smarter, you hope, but survival tastes like ash when it has no witness. One week in, you find a scrap of charcoal and begin to draw on the back of a broken tile. Not words, images, a ribbon, a coin. A girl's face turned away, a lion's paw. You bury it in the garden beneath the olive tree, just so some version of your story survives. 2 weeks in, a woman from the neighborhood stops you near the well. You used to work in the city, didn't you? She asks. I've seen that look. You force a smile. Not anymore. She nods, doesn't press, hands you a fig, just one. Eat, she says. You're still breathing. That's something. It is. You chew slowly, savoring the sweetness. It tastes like Rome, but softer. Then on the 15th morning, something breaks the quiet. A messenger. He's young, nervous. Hands Sabinus a small scroll. Leaves without a word. Sabinus reads. Grunts. Calls for you. You wipe your hands, approach. He holds out the scroll. For you. You freeze. How he shrugs. It's sealed. Not mine to ask. You take it. Your fingers tremble as you break the wax. Inside room for you. The red lantern hasn't gone out, but we understand. If you don't come back, be well, we remember. See Cassia. You read the words again and again. And then you cry. Not loudly, not beautifully. Just a slow leak of something you hadn't let out until now. Because someone remembers. Someone saw. Someone is still waiting, not for your return, but for your truth. Later that night, you climb the stairs behind the courtyard and look over the rooftops. You can't see the Subura from here, but you know the direction. You imagine the lupanar glowing with its usual oil lamp haze, Cassia sitting with her feet in a basin, Livia humming the madam, counting coins like rosary beads. They're still there, and so are you. But something has changed. You are not that girl anymore. Not quite. You carry her bones, her memories, her voice. But now she has shape. Now she has meaning. You don't return the next day, or the day after. But on the 7th day, you find yourself weaving a ribbon again, this time into a basket handle, just to see the gold catch light. And when you lift your head and say your old name softly, just once, it doesn't hurt. It sounds like a story, one only you can tell. By the time the 3rd month begins, your new name no longer feels like a mask. It fits, your mouth sits easily on your tongue. The people in Trastevere know you as Maya. Now the quiet girl who sweeps early, speaks little, and never asks for more than figs in the morning and warmth at night. It's not a lie exactly. It's just the version of you that the silence prefers. But even silence has cracks. One afternoon, while rinsing sheets at the river's edge, a woman from the baker's house squats beside you. Her hands are quick, practiced, but her eyes keep sliding toward you. I heard you came from the Subura, she says, not even trying to sound casual. You keep scrubbing, a long time ago. She nods. They say there was trouble. There's always trouble. She leans closer. They say a girl disappeared. Others too. You pause just for a second. People vanish in Rome all the time. She straightens, but not everyone's missed. And there it is. The edge. The question inside the question. She leaves soon after, and you don't look up until she's gone. That night you lie on your mat and think about the girls. Not just the ones who vanished, but the ones who stayed. Cassia, Julia, Dama, whose laugh could fill a room and who probably turned her own arrest into a comedy by now. You wonder if they're safe, if they still remember your name. And you think about him, the man in the alley. The one who looked behind him, not in fear, but with calculation. You don't know who he was, but he knew you saw. You wrap your arms around your knees and listen to the frogs in the river sing their low, endless song. Later you wake with a start. Not from a sound, from a thought. What if you're the last witness? That idea coils in your chest, tightening. Because if that's true, then silence is not safety, it's complicity. You rise before dawn. At the courtyard basin, you splash cold water on your face. The sky is still dark. Sabinus stirs in his room, coughing quietly. You leave a note. Thank you for the stillness. I needed it. M. And then you go. Back toward the city, back across the bridge, back to the Subura. It's dangerous, but it feels like walking into your own shadow and finally deciding to claim it. You reach the edge of the district just as the market is waking. Bread stalls creak open. A pig squeals in protest. A man sneezes like he's launching a javelin. Everything is the same, and nothing is. You take the long route around the lupanar. The red lantern still flickers. A woman you don't know sits on the step, painting her lips with crushed berries. She doesn't look up. You duck into a side alley, then another. Until you find it, the bathhouse wall with the faded mural Venus with her crooked smile, one hand on her hip, looking like she's in on every secret Rome's ever told. And below it, the graffiti. Someone has scratched something new beneath the old scrawls. She saw. She left. She still breathes. You don't know who wrote it. Maybe Cassia. Maybe no one. But it tells you what you need to know someone still remembers. You step out into the main street. And that's when he sees you. Not the man from the alley, not yet. Lucius. He's older now somehow, more tired, but he stops in his tracks. Maya, he says, uncertain. You nod once. Not really, but yes. He walks slowly as if you might vanish. I thought you were gone. I was. Why come back? You take a deep breath, because no one else did. He doesn't press. He just points toward the Temple of Concord. There's someone you should talk to. You raise an eyebrow. A priest. No, he says. A widow. Her son vanished. She's been asking questions no one wants answered. You nod. Later that day, you sit beside the widow in the temple courtyard. Her face is drawn, but not broken. Her hands tremble, but her voice does not. He worked at the Senate, she says. He walked home every night down the Subura. Then one night he didn't. You listen. You listen hard. And when she finishes, you tell her a story. Not all of it. Not your name. Not the ribbon. Just what you saw. The alley, the blood. The man with the scar and the robe too clean to be innocent. You give her a piece of the truth. She grips your hand. Later, she gives you a pouch of coins. You refuse it. I don't need payment, you say. Just protection for the ones still left behind. She nods. I know someone. And so the truth begins its slow crawl into the daylight. Not loudly, not with drama, but with a woman walking out of hiding and another woman refusing to bury her son in silence. You return to Trastevere that night. You scrub dishes, sweep floors, nod politely to strangers, but you sleep better. Because sometimes living is more than hiding. Sometimes it's remembering and choosing to be remembered. Trastevere never asked you questions. Not when you first arrived, not when you vanished for a day, and not when you returned with a new steadiness in your step. That's what you appreciate about this part of Rome. It doesn't demand explanations. It just watches quietly and lets people decide for themselves how much to carry. You keep sweeping, washing, rising before dawn. But something's shifted inside you. like a door cracked open in a room you thought was sealed. You still wake in the night, sometimes heart racing, hand reaching for a ribbon that's no longer there. But you breathe through it now. You whisper to the dark, "Not tonight. I remember who I am." You still go to the market every third morning. Not because you need much, but because the rhythm is familiar grounding. Today, the fishmonger wraps your sardines in fig leaves without asking. The baker saves you the heel of the loaf, the softest part, and the flower seller presses a single bloom into your hand, a marigold bright and defiant. "You looked like you needed color," she says. You thank her with a nod. Back home, Livia, the woman you work for, asks if you've seen the morning tablet postings. You haven't. She slides one across the table. A new law. Something about increased patrols near the Subura. Curfews. For public order, it says. You recognize the wording. You've heard those lies before. But farther down the posting, a name catches your eye. A senator. The one with the scar. Not arrested, not exiled, promoted. You stare at the name for a long time. Something wrong, Livia asks. You fold the tablet carefully. No, just memory. That afternoon, Lucius visits again. You meet him by the river where the reeds lean like old women whispering gossip. He sits beside you with his usual awkwardness, always a bit hunched, like he's afraid of being mistaken for someone with authority. I spoke with the widow, he says. She's going forward, petitioning the praetor, publicly. You nod. She's brave. She's tired, he corrects. Same as you. You look out at the water. She won't win, you say. No, but she'll be heard. Maybe that's enough. You walk home slowly, the marigold still tucked behind your ear. That night, as you scrape lentils into the cooking pot and sweep the ash from the hearth, Livia stops you. There's a man, she says. Came by earlier. Didn't leave his name. Said he was looking for someone with stories. You still. What kind of stories? The kind Rome doesn't write down. You nod, and the next day you go. Not to the Subura, not to the Lupanar, but to a house near the Aventine, a small building tucked between larger ones, unassuming except for the stone owl carved above the door. Inside waits a woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes like they've forgotten how to blink. She doesn't introduce herself. She just gestures to the seat beside her scrolls. Tell me, she says, and you do. You tell her about the alleys and the fountains, about the oil lamps and the laughter and the bruises that never showed. You describe the man with the scar, the girls who disappeared, the moments of grace inside a job made from silence. You tell her about the ribbon, about the fig, about the poem on the wall. She sings, she smiles, she opens the door, but never the heart. Not anymore. She writes every word. You want a name on this? She asks. You pause. No, just truth. She nods. And when you leave, the sun is setting, orange and tired. You walk back to Trastevere with bare hands and a lighter chest. Back home, Livia is kneading dough. You're late, she mutters. You smile. I got distracted. She doesn't ask. You eat together in quiet. And that night before sleep, you sit outside with your back against the wall and look up at the stars. Somewhere across the river, someone is reading your words. And maybe one day, a girl like you, years from now, miles from here, will find them scratched into a wall, or written on a scroll, or whispered in a bathhouse. And she'll know. She wasn't alone. You were here. You lived. Days pass. Then weeks. Life settles back into rhythm, but not the same one you knew before. Something inside you has shifted, and the city seems to know it. You move through Trastevere like a ghost in her own skin, visible and invisible at once. You fetch water, sweep steps, rinse pots, and nod to vendors. You speak only when necessary and never about the past. But the past doesn't let go just because you turn away. It returns in whispers. You hear it in the voice of a visiting tradesman, boasting about a cleansing in the Subura, how the guards rounded up a handful of troublemakers and made an example of them. You hear it in the shiver of the widow's voice when she visits the temple again and offers a sacrifice for her son's memory. And you hear it most of all in your own breath on sleepless nights, when your mind replays the image of a man's bloodied robe and the face he turned toward you, not away. That moment lives in your ribs now. You carry it like a second spine. One afternoon, you see a girl outside the dye shop. She's young, 16, 17. The color of her tunic marks her as new, too clean, too bright. You recognize the way she holds herself, half defiant, half scared. A girl just beginning to understand that the streets don't ask your story, they make it. You cross to her slowly. She watches you warily, you waiting for someone you ask. She shrugs. Not sure. You nod. That's a dangerous place to stand if you're not. She smirks. I can handle myself. You almost believe her. Almost. You reach into your pouch and pull out a coin. Take this. Get bread, and don't come back here. She stiffens. Why do you care? You pause. Because someone once didn't. You walk away before she can answer. Later that evening, Lucius visits again. He brings you a scroll, not for your hands, but for your ears. They printed it, he says. Not with your name, but the story. It's spreading. You feel something in your chest press outward, like your ribs expanding around an old wound. And you ask? He shrugs. Some are angry, some are scared. Some are pretending they never read it at all. That sounds right. But one thing he says no one's doing. You raise an eyebrow. What laughing? You smile. Small. Real. That night you dream not of running or hiding or dying, but of a girl standing in a quiet garden, hands stained with dye, whispering a name into a fig tree's shadow. And the tree answers by blooming. The next day you visit the temple, not Venus's, not Juno's. Minerva, wisdom, strategy. Women who keep silent until it matters. You light a small lamp at her feet. You murmur, thank you for showing me that silence can be loud when it wants to be. And as you turn to go, you pass a woman in white, older, with a scar across her cheek and a face you almost remember. She stops, studies you. You wrote it, she says. You don't answer. She nods. Good, and walks on. That's when you understand something no historian can teach, no scribe can record. In Rome, your name doesn't matter, but your echo does. And right now, yours is beginning to circle. You return home. The olive tree in the courtyard sways gently in the breeze. You reach into the soil and dig up the broken tile you buried months ago, the one with the ribbon and the lion's paw. You clean it and place it on the windowsill. You don't hide anymore. Let them see. Let them wonder. Let them remember. You were there. You are still here. And this time you're not whispering. You're waiting. The festival of Venus is approaching, and even Trastevere feels it in the air. Bright ribbons hang from doorways. Vendors shout with a little more flair. The baker sculpts bread into hearts and shells. A group of boys paints crude images of the goddess on a plaster wall, one too anatomically creative for her taste. You pass them on the way to the market, the hem of your tunic catching a breeze that carries the scent of myrrh and charred figs. Someone has begun lighting incense early, and everywhere women are preparing their offerings, flowers, hairpins, folded scraps of hope. This festival was never yours. Not really. The Venus they celebrate is the polished version, fertile, beloved, golden. Theirs is not the Venus of the alleyways or the whispered prayers in dim rooms. Not the goddess of survival. Not the one who hears girls cry softly into their own shoulders when the door finally closes. You know that Venus. You served her. You outlived her favor. Still part of you feels pulled, not by belief, but memory. At midday, Lucius finds you near the fountain. You're not hiding anymore, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Neither are you. He grins. People are reading your story. Do they believe it? They argue. That's how you know it's true. He sits beside you, passes you a honey cake wrapped in fig leaves. For the festival, he says, don't make me eat it alone. You take a bite. It's sweet and sticky and reminds you of evenings in the lupanar when the cook would bring leftover desserts meant for senators, but handed down to girls like a blessing. You eat slowly. Across the plaza, a priestess calls out to a group of women. Venus welcomes your offerings, speak your desires. One by one, they step forward. Drop coins, flowers, locks of hair. Lucius glances at you. You want to go. You shake your head. I already gave her everything. He nods, says nothing. That evening, the streets fill with noise, music, clapping feet, pounding cobblestones in chaotic rhythm. The city becomes a body pulsing, moving, glowing from within. You watch from your window, and for a moment, you imagine stepping into the crowd, not as Maya, not as the girl who hid, but as the woman who chose. You dress simply, tuck your ribbon into your sash, walk slowly toward the celebration. No one stops you. No one stares. You reach the temple steps just as the final chants are fading. You don't go inside. You place a single offering on the step, a pebble wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Inside, scrawled with charcoal, just one line: she walked through fire and didn't burn. Then you turn, and she's there. Cassia, standing under the archway across the street, arms crossed, smile crooked. Took you long enough, she says. You walk to her. The crowd swirls around you, both uncaring. I thought you were, I was, she says. Then I wasn't. We keep moving. That's what we do. She reaches into her pouch and pulls out a coin, flips it, catches it. Still work, you smile. I remember enough. Cassia links her arm through yours. There's talk of a new house. Women only. Safer. Stories get passed around, not silenced. You blink. You're building it. We're all building it. You walk together through the streets. Two women who once sold dreams, now dreaming something else. Historians will never know your names, but the girls will. And that's enough. Back in Trastevere, the olive tree sways again. On your sill, the tile glows faintly in the lamplight. Tomorrow, someone new may knock on your door. Not for service, but for guidance. And when she does, you'll open it. Not because you owe her, but because someone once opened it for you. Morning comes with the smell of rain on warm stone, a rare blessing in Rome, and one that seems to quiet the whole city. You rise early before the chickens, before even the grocers begin stacking olives and onions onto woven mats. The drizzle falls soft and steady, wrapping the streets in a hush that feels almost holy. You breathe it in. For the first time in weeks, your body feels rested. Not just in the muscles, but in the bones. You stretch, roll your shoulders. No ache, no warning signals. It's a small victory, but you take it. By now, the neighborhood knows you. They call you Maya, but they look at you differently. Not with suspicion, with a kind of trust. The children wave. The old man with the cracked jug offers you first pick of his apricots. You've become a fixture, predictable, quiet, reliable. But deep down, you know better. You're still the girl from Subura who saw too much. And today, that part of you is called to the surface again. At midday, a woman knocks on the side door of the house. You recognize her not by name, but by posture. Shoulders tight, chin lifted too high like she's trying to hold in something heavy. You meet her in the courtyard. "I was told you listen," she says. You nod. "Sometimes I speak too." She's younger than you, but not by much. Her hands are ink-stained. Her sash is neat. She smells of parchment and damp stone. "I work in the archives," she says. "In the Senate." You don't flinch. There are records, she continues, about disappearances, edicts, witness statements that were erased. You cross your arms, and you think, "I'm one of the names." "I think you could be," she says, "or at least someone who knows what the names don't say." You glance up at the olive tree. Its leaves dance slightly even though there's no wind. "You know what happens to women who talk too much," you say. She nods. "I know what happens to women who don't." That catches you. She sits on the edge of the fountain, pulls out a tiny scroll, unrolls it. "My sister vanished 4 years ago," she says. "She worked near the baths. I was 12. I wasn't allowed to ask questions." You sit beside her slowly. "She wore a gold ribbon," the woman adds. "Said it made her feel seen." Your throat tightens. "She never came home," she finishes. "But I found her name scratched into a wall last month, under a poem." You nod once. "She was kind. You don't need to say more." The girl leans forward. "I want to write them down. All of them. Not just what the records say. The truth. But I need voices, witnesses. You're one." You look at her certainty, at the stubborn fire in her eyes. You envy her. You remember when you had that same heat. You nod. "I'll help. Not because it's safe, because it's time." The days that follow become different. You work the same hours, sweep the same stones, mend the same cloaks. But now at night, women gather. Quietly, in 2s and 3s, in corners of gardens and back rooms. They bring stories like gifts told with shaking hands and eyes that dart toward doors. You listen. You remember. You add your own. Cassia helps. Of course she does. She remembers everything. Julia joins too, her voice stronger than anyone expected. Even Dama appears one evening wrapped in a shawl and carrying 3 small scrolls tucked in her bodice. "I never forget a name," she says, tapping her temple. The archive girl, her name is Elia, begins to write it all down. Not in neat ink for the Senate, but in code and slashes and symbols on broken tiles and fabric scraps and hollowed wax tablets hidden in spice jars. Because truth, when written with care, can survive anything, even Rome. Historians may never find these stories, but the girls will, and that's what matters. One night, Elia pauses during a meeting, looks at you. "What do you want this to become?" she asks. In the end, you think for a long time. Then say, "I want a girl standing in a corner one day, scared and unsure to see something on a wall that tells her she's not alone. She's part of something. That someone walked this road before her and kept walking." Elia nods. Later that week, a new girl appears in Trastevere. No name, no questions. She carries herself like someone used to being watched. You give her a blanket. Cassia gives her bread. Elia gives her a stylus. And when she sees the tile on your sill, the one with the lion's paw and ribbon, she says, "That was mine." You smile and welcome her home. You don't mark the days anymore, not in chalk, not in scratches on the lintel. But the air has changed again, and that tells you something new is coming. A shift you can't quite name, but you feel it under your skin, like the way animals sense storms before the clouds gather. Today there's a letter, not on parchment, not signed with wax. It's stitched into a cloth bundle of herbs left on your doorstep, knotted carefully with twine. inside a small square of linen embroidered in dark red thread. It reads, "My daughter never came back, but I heard what you're doing. This is for the next girl." You hold it in your hands for a long time. The thread slightly uneven, someone old perhaps, or trembling. And for a second, the weight of it hits you. All the voices, all the stories, all the ones who didn't make it to the part where they get to tell theirs. You breathe in the scent of mint and thyme. It steadies you. Later at the fountain, Julia is waiting. "She told me she dreamed of Rome falling," she says, nodding toward the olive tree. "But not with fire, with silence. That the city would someday be buried under its own refusal to listen." You smirk. Your mother was a poet. She was a laundress. Same thing. The women are gathering again tonight, this time in the bathhouse ruins behind the bakery. They sit on crumbled mosaics, lean against columns half swallowed by ivy. And this time they don't just whisper, they practice. Voices rising in unison. Not a chant, not a protest. A rehearsal. Because a senator's wife is visiting Trastevere next week, and she has been asking curious questions about the women who disappeared during her husband's campaign. Cassia leads the rehearsal. Elia records it all. You sit near the back, watching them work. And it hits you again how far this has come from the quiet girl who used to crouch behind beaded curtains, hoping for a clean towel and an uneventful client. You've built something. It's fragile. It's loud. And it's yours. Still, not everyone agrees with what you're doing. One night, a tile is thrown through your window. On it, in charcoal, "Keep your place." You pick up the shard. Trace the smear of soot. You don't cry. You place it next to the lion paw tile. A reminder. That silence has its own violence. Cassia scoffs. They're scared. That means we're doing something right. You nod. But the fear settles in your chest anyway. A few days later, the local magistrate's clerk stops by on accident. He asks too many questions about your bread supply, about your visitors, about where Cassia sleeps. But he doesn't stay long. Because Julia appears in the doorway, her eyes dark as storm water, holding a ladle like a sword. "Unless you're here for soup," she says, "I'd leave." He leaves. You exhale. At night, you wake to the sound of singing. Not loud, not perfect, but dozens of voices weaving together through the alleys like a spell. And suddenly you're 16 again, but not the girl in the lupanar. You're standing behind the wall, listening, choosing. The next morning, a girl knocks. Not scared, not trembling. She asks for paper. You hand her the last sheet. She sits on your step and begins to write. Cassia watches from the window. Elia smiles, and you finally understand. This isn't just survival anymore. It's invention. It's inheritance. It's what happens when the forgotten start remembering each other. Historians still argue whether Rome's women had any real agency, if their resistance mattered, if it lasted, if it even existed. You wish you could sit them down in this courtyard. Let them hear the girls' laughter in the distance. Let them read the names stitched into the washcloths hanging from the olive tree. Let them see the tiles, everyone now etched with a symbol, a story, a date. Let them ask who started it all. And maybe you'd lie. Maybe you'd shrug. Or maybe you'd say she walked through fire and didn't burn, and they'd never know her name. But they'd feel it in the cracks of the wall, and they'd know. Somewhere a girl once chose to speak. The sky above Trastevere turns a soft lavender in the evenings now. You sit on the rooftop with your feet tucked under your shawl, watching the day fold itself into the night like worn linen. Rome glows differently these days. Not brighter, just more awake. Below you, the street murmurs. A woman laughs, a sharp, full sound that echoes against the tiles. A broom sweeps stone. Someone sings badly. Life in its ordinary rhythm. But inside the house, something extraordinary is happening. Elia is preparing the archive. Not for senators, not for scribes, for the future. It's made of strange things, woven fabric, etched bone-dried clay fragments of mirror-folded parchment, tucked into the hollows of broken sandal soles. Every piece tells a sliver of story. Together they hum with the quiet fire of survival. Cassia curates it like a priestess. She polishes each tile, smells the ink, tests the strength of the string used to bind a scroll made from repurposed fish scales. They'll never expect this in a museum, she jokes. You nod, smiling. Then Dama arrives, carrying a wooden box. Inside, 28 carved beads, each with a single symbol. No repeats. No obvious meaning. But when arranged, they tell the full name of every girl she ever knew who vanished. You help string them into a necklace. You'll wear it, she asks. You hesitate. Then I'll lend it to the next girl. And that's what you do. 1 week later, the girl arrives. She's barely 13. Her tunic is torn, her braids too tight. She has calluses on her heels and fury in her jaw. She doesn't cry. She asks, "What do I do now?" You take the necklace from the peg near the doorway. You place it in her hand. You remember, you say. And then you teach. You walk her through the house. Show her where the cracked tiles are hidden, where the notes live behind the loose brick, where the chalk stays dry under the floorboard, where the backup fire oil is stored just in case. She nods, doesn't ask questions. By evening, she's folding laundry with Julia like they've done it together for years. It strikes you how quickly these girls become ready. It's something the Empire will never understand. And that's your greatest weapon. Historians still argue whether networks like this ever really existed, whether groups of women, especially those once enslaved or condemned, could have formed systems so intricate, so durable without being discovered. Let them argue. Because even now, as you sit on the roof, you hear the signals. A clink of pottery, a dropped pin, 3 coughs, messages moving through Rome's back alleys like rainwater. Tonight there's news. The senator's wife, the one Elia mentioned, she sent a messenger. Quiet, careful. A thread of silver at her temple and calluses not from needlework but sword training. She wants to meet, but not in secret, at the Forum, in daylight. Elia swallows hard. Julia clenches her jaw. You just exhale. Then we meet, you say. Not because it's safe, but because it's real. The next morning you go alone. Not because you're brave, but because you're known. You walk with bread in one arm and a scarf over your hair. No symbols, no declarations. And there she is, standing under the statue of Minerva. She doesn't smile, but she nods. Where are they? She asks. All around you, you reply. Then, but if you mean the archive, I burned it. She flinches. You lean in. It was never in one place. Never on one scroll. You can't burn what was never written. A pause. Then a smile. You're smarter than the Senate. You smirk. That's not a high bar. She hands you a ring. Carved onyx. A falcon in flight. Wear this if you ever need to walk through the gates, she says. Or if you ever need to leave quickly. Then she's gone, and you return home. You don't tell the girls everything, but you do hang the ring on a hook in the pantry, beside the ribbon and the beads. Later that week, the new girl, her name's Livia, asks to read aloud from the wax tablet Elia copied. She stumbles over some of the names. You help her sound them out. When she finishes, she asks, "Were these all real?" You look around. At Cassia pouring oil into a lamp. At Julia braiding Dama's hair. At Elia smudging ink from her cheek. Then you say, they are real. Every day we remember them, they stay alive. Livia nods. I want to be on the tablet someday. You squeeze her hand. You already are. You don't know exactly when the city starts calling you mother. Not Mater Romae in the grand marble sense. Not some sainted statue on a plinth. Just mother. The one who welcomes, warns, and weaves the threads. It begins with a note left in a loaf of barley bread. Then a child whispers it at the market. Then a washerwoman nods in your direction and mouths the word. You pretend not to notice. But the girls giggle when they hear it. You're famous now, Elia says. Don't let it go to your sandals. You roll your eyes. I haven't worn sandals in years, she grins. That's exactly the kind of thing a mother would say. But with that name comes weight. You feel it in your knees when you kneel to patch a tunic. You feel it in your voice when you try to explain why some girls can't come back. And you feel it most when Livia climbs into your lap, not to cry, but to rest. She falls asleep there, head tucked into your shoulder, and you realize suddenly that she's never done that before. None of them have. Not like this. Because the work used to be about escaping. Now, it's about staying. Staying long enough to heal. Staying long enough to pass something down. And staying long enough to make sure no one ever feels as alone as you once did in that cold stone room in the Lupanar. Historians still argue whether women like you could have truly shaped culture if they merely endured it, or if in quiet corners they transformed it. But maybe that's the wrong question, because transformation isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's a girl learning to laugh again. Sometimes it's a tile being scrubbed until it shines. Sometimes it's a name whispered safely for the first time in decades. And sometimes it's just a house full of worn blankets, warm bread, and one oil lamp that's never allowed to go out. Tonight, Cassia brings home a scroll. Not an old one. Fresh parchment, sharp ink. It's from a scribe in the Senate district who wants to record your wisdom for future generations. You cackle. They're about 50 years too late. Then give them something timeless, Julia says, settling into the cushion beside you. You light the lamp, open the scroll, and begin to write. Not the names of men, not the deeds of emperors, but the story of what it means to survive without forgetting who you were before the fire. You don't get far. Livia interrupts to ask how to spell dignity. You tell her. She writes it carefully, tongue between her teeth. You keep writing. Elia snores in the corner. Cassia hums a hymn from her village. Julia sharpens a quill with too much concentration. And you remember. Not just what was done to you, but who you became anyway. You remember the first day you walked out of the brothel, sandals, broken heart hollow, with nothing in your hands but a bruised orange and the sun on your back. You remember choosing to stay alive even when it meant hiding, hurting, folding yourself into smaller and smaller corners just to breathe. You remember when safety felt like a myth and sisterhood a luxury. And now the house smells like time and ink. Now girls call you mother and mean it with no shame. Now the street outside your window sings itself to sleep. You close your eyes. Not forever. Just for now. Because tomorrow someone will knock on the door. Someone scared, or furious, or lost. And you'll be ready. Because that's what mothers do. They open the door. They say, "Come in, sit down. You're safe now." And they mean it. Always. And now, as the night wraps its arms around the rooftops of ancient Rome, and the oil lamp flickers low with a golden whisper, you breathe. The streets are quieter. The girls are asleep. And even the moon seems to exhale with you. You shift your weight on the cushion, letting your muscles soften. The kind of softness that only comes after a storm, not weakness, but rest. You listen to the distant rhythm of sandals on stone, to the hush of fabric folding in the dark, to your own heartbeat steady and sure. And you realize you're not alone. Not anymore. You never truly were. Because even in the silence, stories stayed with you. Even in the dark, some part of you reached forward. And now the reaching is over. You've arrived. You've become. Not something new, but something whole. So tonight, let yourself drift. Not because the fight is done, but because you've earned this breath, this hush, this one moment of peace before the sun nudges your shoulder again. You've lived 100 lives within these walls. You've buried names and raised new ones. You've whispered comfort and shouted truth, and still the world turns. Tomorrow more girls will knock. Tomorrow more names will rise from the dust. But for now you rest. For now you're safe. And for tonight at least you sleep as Rome sleeps, ancient, tired, scarred, and still burning with the quiet, holy fire of the ones who refused to disappear. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.